Have you ever tried to draw an anime face, but no matter what you did, your anime faces looked like a potato? Because I did. Therefore, I studied anime art style for a week and learned a lot of things that helped me improve my anime faces. So let me show you everything that I learned so you can improve your anime faces faster and easier. So now here will be everything that I'll be talking about today. So we'll start with a simple tool that I learned, but also layers and other things that I used often. And then we'll go into rendering an anime face, then obviously anime eyes, hair, and finally some effects that will help you go from a good anime face to an amazing one. So let's start with a simple tools. So the first tool that I used a lot was a simple lasso tool plus airbrush. So pretty much a lasso tool, everyone knows it just selects an area and then you can paint inside without any spill outside. So when we pick an airbrush, we can see that we'll get one side hard and one soft. And it's actually amazing for rendering pretty much anything, not only anime faces, but everything. But we can also add a couple of things to that. So next we have a simple smudge tool, and I use a built-in CSP blur brush and also a couple of different ones, but this is the most often that I used a tool. So it basically just smudges, it blurs the edges. And now combine this with a simple eraser, we can have more control over the edges. So pretty much we can just smudge it and then make a harder edge. Boom. Pretty useful, pretty important to know when you want to render anything. And we can actually see that here. So everything I mostly did with a simple lasso tool plus airbrush, but then I just went and blurred a little bit the edges to make them a little bit softer. You can see them. And even here, lasso tool plus airbrush and also eraser. It just helps you shape up your shapes and have more control over the edges. So then we want to talk about the layers, and there's a few that I use mainly in anime art style. So let's see, here we have a blob. So now make a new layer and we have a lot of layer mode to choose. So first is obviously multiply, which just multiplies the color. So it adds the color below and the color that you want to paint on top. We can actually clip it to this. You can see that we have a simple shadow layer. So I use multiply often for shadows. Then the next layer that I use sometimes is a color dodge. So here, let's pick an airbrush, pick like a purple color. And here we see that it just boosts the colors. It makes them more saturated and just exposes them. Pretty useful if you want to do subsurface scattering, for example, or a glow in your eyes, or the transitions here. But I also use a glow dodge sometimes, add glow, works similar, and then overlay. Overlay is actually great for subsurface scattering. Then we have also hard light layer, which is actually great for adding light that I did here. Obviously this is a study from an amazing artist. And then another layer that I use sometimes is like a brightness, color, saturation, or hue. Just depends on what I want to actually do. And also if you want my brushes, they are for free in description, and with them you'll get 30 art tips that will help you improve your art in 30 days. But also next month I'll be launching a face drawing course that will help you go from a basic potato to a fully rendered face in a couple of art styles. So now it's half off till I just release it. So now let's go to a basic anime face rendering. So first let's start with the skin. So when it comes to actually painting and rendering anime faces, what I learned is just start simple. So pretty much just pick one color and just lay the base color for everything, for hair, eyes, and skin. But then choosing more colors was a huge struggle for me, and I fixed that. And actually thinking about the whole scene helped me a lot, because color will look different in different relationships. Think of your scene. So what colors do you have there? How strong the light is, what color the light is, and pretty much everything. So pretty much if we have a scene with like a more water, let's say here that I did a quick study, you'll see that the skin color now will appear more bluer, cooler, because of all the light that actually reflects from the water, which is blue. So you can see here. And also you can see that because of the background here, the shadows are actually cooler and more purplish instead of like this color skin. So obviously relationships between colors, but also contrast. And obviously there can be a couple of ways to add contrast. And first one is saturation. So it actually ruined a lot of my drawings, just oversaturating everything. And we can see here that when we have two colors very saturated, they are like not really easy to look. And whereas here we see that this red now became less saturated, and obviously purple stayed the same. And now you can actually rest your eyes and it doesn't look that draining. So for example, here we can see that we have a cooler, less saturated shadows, and also here the subsurface scattering is more saturated and it just looks much better rather than just taking this color, making this something like that. You see, it's much more appealing to look. So don't oversaturate everything. And also we can add contrast by a hue. So for example, a complementary colors like best for anime art style is pretty much warm and cool. And this is perfect combo that I actually observed here in the study. So we can obviously see again that we have a cooler shadows and warmer skin and also subsurface scattering. So here you can see, so this could actually be like more redder, something like this, boom, and then maybe less saturated, or actually opposite, so more saturated blue like this, and now red, less saturated. And also we have relationships between colors. So here we can see that this ball here, the left one, actually looks darker than this one, and they are actually the same color. You can see here, because this one has a dark background, now this appears lighter than obviously the background, which makes it look much lighter than this, where the background is actually light. So this is darker, this is lighter. And that was actually a struggle when I did these studies, because like I was picking the colors from the hue and they didn't look like these colors here because of the relationships between these. So here we can see that there's a darker background to this, so it means that this might actually be darker, but this is actually lighter. But thinking not only what you actually see the skin color is, but also the background of it and the relationships will actually help you with your colors a lot. And obviously we can see here that we have the same color because this and this is the same, and we add again different backgrounds, so this one will be a cooler background. Naturally this ball will look much warmer. Now the opposite will be here, so we have a warmer background, but now this appears cooler. And also if we put another one here, so now this looks obviously a little bit warmer than this, but still cooler than the background. So yeah, these are like a good relationships, a good things to know. Now I also learned how to make the anime faces much more appealing. So I used to just draw them like pretty boring without anything. I just looked at the color and painted the whole face and wonder why this is look flat and boring. And the answer is just add color variety. So if we see here, for example, we can see that the middle part is actually a little bit warmer in hue than the bottom one. So what I actually usually do is let's take a color of the skin, boom, and place it on this face. Actually make it here, we have a simple skin color, boom. Okay, so now what I do is I actually just divide the head into thirds. So we have the upper portion, okay, the forehead portion, the middle one, and the bottom one. So pretty much the bottom one will be more yellower, so the upper one will be more yellower because like there's not much blood vessels, it's only like a skull. So we can actually do that here. Let's make a new layer, clip it, take the color of the skin, push the hue into more yellower hues. We can airbrush and just gently, even maybe make it more yellower, and we can just gently just draw on top of the third. So then the middle one is, we have here like cheeks, more warmer tones, like a lot of blood vessels, blush and stuff. So yeah, we can just pick the color, move the hue towards more reddish, bump the saturation a little bit, and maybe a little bit darker. And now paint gently the middle portion of the face. And I also like to actually add this into not only the middle portion, but also the eyelids, a little bit to nose, even lips, neck, and actually you can see here I added to the chest, to arms a little bit, boom, and neck here, boom. So we can do that. And then the bottom one, I usually just leave it for female characters because then it just looks like just shaved beard. But for men, I would actually just pick the color, go here, make it a little bit cooler, and just do that. But you can see here that it just looks like a beard shaved. So yeah, we can just go back, and it actually just still looks cooler because of the middle part, which is warmer. So as we said before about the relationships between the colors. So obviously now it might be a little bit too strong, so we can decrease the opacity a little bit, and now just go and erase a little bit. So we'll leave like cheeks. And obviously we can see here a little bit of color variety here. And again, this is also a study of an amazing artist. So now for shading anime faces, I actually realized that the best thing is doing cel shading, so more harder and more simple shadows. So as I said before about the layers, we can make a new multiply layer, clip it to the base color layer, and then just go and paint some shadows. So for shadows, what I just usually do is pick the color of the skin, move the hue a little bit so it's not that muddy, and just make it a little bit darker. So here we can see it's a warm shadow, but we can also make it a little bit cooler like this. Just depends on what you're actually going for. And we can actually bump the saturation and warmness of the skin, and then just do the shadows a little bit cooler. Maybe something like this, boom. But yeah, it's super simple. So we can either just pick a brush and just paint it ourselves, or we can just take the lasso tool, boom, and just, let's say, boom, fill it, and we have it. Obviously we could do something like this triangle here, boom, delete it, boom. Now add a little bit of shadows here, the mouth, and like nose here, boom. So yeah, we have a simple shadows here. And obviously we can then go and still like blur it a little bit, not that much. So as you can see here, it's not that blurred. So maybe here we could blur because this is like a smooth transition. But yeah, it's super simple way to add shadows. Also, you see here we have a cooler shadow. We can make it warmer, not that warm, darker, boom, a little bit warmer like this, and just looks alright. Okay, you don't actually have to use multiply layer, but what it does is also boost the color variety that we did below. So that's pretty pog. But then for shadows, what I actually also do is I make a new multiply layer and I add more shadows, more darker shadows. Pretty much just take the color, make it a little bit darker. We can go still with a harder brush, obviously make it multiply. Just go and put the ambient occlusion in places that are harder to get. So like below things, between things. So pretty much just spaces where the light has a harder time getting in. So probably like nostrils, below the chin, the mouth, the jaw here, a little bit like here. So for example, you can see that here that we have a darker portion because this hair here around and also the jaw creates this shadow darker below. Boom, here. And you can actually skip it because it will add a little bit more realism to your anime drawing and rendering. So, you know, if you want to just keep it simple, cell shading, just leave it. So now other thing that actually goes hard with the anime art style is actually make this a warmer or cooler shadow, something like this, maybe less saturated. Okay, is a subsurface scattering. So as I said before, make a new overlay layer, pick like a harder brush, pick like a more saturated red, orange color, and just paint it on the transition between light and shadow. For example, here. Obviously this is super quick, but you get the point, something like here. Obviously we could make the shadow even cooler, but for now it's all we need. And then I actually go with an airbrush and just paint gently the transition again. It just adds like a more of a glow that I really like. Obviously the nose area under the jaw, like here, would be more saturated, something like this. Boom, we can actually go and blur things and then just decrease the opacity a little bit, and it adds like a cool, super nice effect. So here we can actually make the shadows even cooler, and just a super nice combo of cool and warm things. So yeah, so now we can also actually add another thing, which is basic bounce light. So here we just select the area of shadow because bounce light and the ambient light is actually weaker than the main light. So the main is here. So we want to make so it won't appear in the light area, only in shadow. So make let's say add glow layer, make it maybe a little bit bluer. Whoa, not that blue. Airbrush and just paint it lightly, maybe a little bit more saturated and blue, something like this. Boom, we can also paint it, let's say here a little bit like that. Also clip it and maybe even to this portion here a little bit, blur it. Boom, just a small color variation. We can add maybe some here. Boom, and it makes it much more interesting. Obviously this is like a quick doodle. We can obviously decrease it, and here I would actually like to make the middle part a little bit more saturated. So obviously you can just skip this bounce, this ambient light, this, and even the darker shadows, and it will still look good. So now let's go to the next part, which is eyes, anime eyes. So here I did another studies of a lot of good artists. So here let's start with one thing. So what I actually like to do, and what I learned to do is pretty much just group up the eyelashes. So whenever I draw them, I just first draw this simple shape, one shape, and then I'll add simple eyelashes like this, boom. And obviously remember that eyelashes go in these directions, boom, boom, boom. They're not going in like here, 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 okay? No. So start with the simple eyeliner and then just add some basic eyelashes. But also don't draw a million of them like that. Just, you can see here that less is more. So group them into one big shape, one big shape, one big shape, and one big shape also. A couple of smaller ones, boom. And also it's super important to think about them as 3D objects. So you can see here the shading, that one side is actually lit, one catches bounce light and is also in shadow. So that's really important. And also I learned in these studies that I really like adding bounce light to these eyes. Obviously these were in study, in the original drawing, but it's something that I really like. So we can add a lot of bounce light. So pretty much what you want to do, or how you want to do this, is just pick the color of the iris, then make a new layer, pick your favorite brush, and just paint it gently like this, boom, because this light will bounce up on these. Also, if it's too strong, which I think looks alright, we can always decrease the opacity a little bit. So now with an iris, with this thing here, what I usually just do is start with a super simple big color shape like this, and then add light. Paint it in, also a little bit above, like that. Take the pupil, paint it in, pupil, boom, and then light, boom, boom, boom. A little bit of bounce light here, and we have it. But what I actually do is just, I first just take it and paint it like that, boom. Obviously I usually just have pupil in the middle already, so I just paint this, maybe add a little bit of bounce light up top, and then make a new layer, clip it, and then add glow. And we just take this color, make it lighter, and you can see here that we have a nice glow. So that's super simple. Now you can probably use like a color dodge, like a glow dodge. A glow dodge is actually nice, and I use it, I think here. You see this colorful saturated transition peak. And obviously we can add some color variety here. So boom, a little bit of bounce light. So this is pretty much what I learned from these studies here. So we start with a base, then add a little bit light like here and here, boom, and then shadows. But also I see that a pure black isn't always the best for it. So you can see here it's not pure black, it's not here, because then it would just be too dark and it would ruin everything. So it's actually a little bit lighter color, same here, even same here. You can see it's warmer, a little bit more reddish. Here it's closer to pure black, but still is not. Here I also added noise, so there's a lot of colors. And here it's super faded. Even here it looks pure black, but it's not. So just watch out with how strong the blacks are in your colors. Now also for highlights, a biggest thing that I realized that is super important to do is not just take a color for the highlight and place it somewhere like here, because you cannot really see that. So what I do instead is I just pick a color, a darker color, and just then paint a highlight inside. But also here I wouldn't put here, more like here perhaps. So let's make this color here, boom, and like that. And we see that it pops much more. So for example here we see that I just picked a black color, boom, then highlight color. For highlights you can probably use a full white color, but yeah, so you can see that it just pops much more rather than just make it pure white. And same here, boom. We can even add a little bit of colors to that. For example, I added a little bit of color dodge, blue one, and you know, see these border around here. Also these highlights here, I really like them. So it's basically white and just 3 dots. It just looks moist. I really like it. And then next thing that I did for eyes is, you can see I added bounce light for the top layer of the eyelid. So obviously highlights, boom, but also a color variety in the form of bounce light. So here I like this study that I did, boom. You can see the top, even the bottom, just pushes a lot of light here, boom, into eyelashes, because these are 3D forms. These are very nice. And also here the warmer hues. So what you can actually also do for the color variety in your eyes is pretty much just pick the eyes, make a new layer, or just alpha lock it, take an airbrush, pick as whatever skin tone, let's say here, just paint this. It will just melt to the face. So for example, here we can do the same, just make a new layer, and you can see that it actually here is more faded and here also is more faded. So I just took this and did that. Boom. It just blends the eyes better with the face, because sometimes it can be just too dark and just look out of place. So now let's go to the next part, which is about anime hair. So here I realized that my anime hair were super flat whenever I drew them. And what actually helped me a lot is adding more color variety, like in pretty much everything. But also this helped me add more depth. So for example, whenever we have hair, let's just pick this color or just see this. What I started doing that I actually learned is pretty much just start with a base color for the hair, our base color, boom. So what I realized, and you can see actually here, is we have a darker bottoms, so here, here, and here, even here and here, and obviously lighter tops. Boom. Obviously depends on the light, but I just started doing this. So make a new layer, pick a darker color, make it a little bit different hue, and paint the bottom of it. Then pick again the hair color, make it lighter, maybe move the hue again, and we have a color variety in our hair. So I actually observed this in this study. So here we have the top, which is lighter than the bottom. Boom. Obviously in the middle we have a middle color. But also you can see in some of these hairs that what I actually did also is this color here. What it is basically just a little bit of hair, a little bit of skin color that is painted on it, boom, and just helps with the overall just blending of the face. And sometimes actually the light reflects on the hair. So for example, even here we can see that, boom, a little bit of color around these face is lighter. But also you can see this here, boom, around the hair. So now actually let me show you an amazing technique of rendering this hair. So you can see that these hair kind of look detailed a lot, like, but they're not. So even here, these, boom, you can see that if we zoom out a little bit, it's pretty detailed, but it's not really just random strokes, but they are not random. So same here, boom. These highlights seem like really nice, but they're not that detailed. Same here. So pretty much just pick a color. Let's say now we're doing highlights. Okay, boom. Pick your favorite brush for rendering, whatever. Just take a round brush, I guess, and make it pretty big and just lay the color on top. And also a huge tip whenever you draw hair. So for example, here, if we have a hair strand, the highlight won't be going like this. Boom. Okay. It will actually go across. So if we have hair going this way, the highlight will go across, boom, like a 90-degree angle. So same here, it won't be going this, but you can see that they follow here, like that. Same here and even here. For example, here also, boom, then these here, then these here, then these here. So if we now have a hair that goes into this direction, so if we have hair that are going in this direction, boom, the highlight would be going this direction. So let's get back, boom. Now we can take eraser. I like this one with a texture. Obviously it's free in the description below. But yeah, I just go and erase a little bit, boom. Now for the top, and I don't go like these from this side. I just go with the hair, okay, like the hair are going, boom, erase. And here we can pretty much just leave it, but we can also do a little bit so something different. So just again pick the color of the highlight and now make your brush a little bit smaller and just paint some strokes somewhere. Again, pick an eraser, boom, go erase some things, make it not like a straight line but a little bit curvy like this, boom. And okay, we have more details. And now last part is we can either just go again with a smaller brush and add some smaller ones like these, boom, and then smaller eraser, and now just punch through with some holes, boom. Okay, we can see that it's pretty detailed, pretty nice. I use this for every one of these, but we can just skip it and just start with a simple eraser, boom, just erase some things like that, boom, and we still have some pretty nice detailed hair. So anime art style is all about less is more, and you can actually go infinity with this, but it will make them look much more realistic. For example, here I just did it once, not even twice. Even here, just big shapes and then erase, boom, boom. And just in the darker parts between hair strand, I just erase it. Same as here, boom, boom. And also these ones, I really like them. So also what I actually like that you can observe in any of these are these cool light transitions between highlight and light. So for example, here we can see this purple line, boom, that goes on the borders of this light, here. Also a little bit of bounce light, you can add it, pretty nice. But even here, we see that we have a light and then we have this transition color. If we zoom in, it's a little bit blurry and pixelated, but you can still see this transitions. A little bit of them are here, boom. Pretty nice color and adds like more life to the drawings. Same here, we see that we have just hard saturated colors, boom. And obviously here like more saturated blues up top and greens in the middle, but obviously less is more. So for example, here we can just make a new layer, make it, let's say, add glow, or actually color glow dodge, and just go add some, boom, like that. We can make it a little bit bluer like that, boom, and then just decrease the opacity. Okay, we can go with an eraser a little bit and just erase a bit of these. It just adds a little bit of like more appeal to your hair, as you can see here and here. Now I think that I learned to make my enemy hair much more appealing. For example, here you can see that it's super simple. So after I finish a drawing of a head like this or rendering my hair, what I do, I just pick like a random color, pick this oval brush of mine and just go and add some random hair sticking out. Boom, like this, like that, maybe one sticking here like that, or two, boom, a little bit of here, maybe even here. But also whenever you just draw like this, don't draw a blob like this. You can do actually go down and then curve. So a rule that you can do is pretty much just 70-30. So 70-30, like an almost golden ratio. So pretty much just adds a little bit more interest and appeal to your curves and things. Here, boom, we have this wave here, boom, boom, and go down. Pretty nice. Same here, boom, 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 and even here, boom. It starts, let's say here, and like 70. It can be actually like 70, 60, whatever. And even here, pretty nice. But what it does, it makes your like overall head shape, hair shapes like much softer, which is more appealing, okay? If we didn't have it here, the hair would just look boring and flat. We can actually decrease the bigger ones like this, boom. And it just looks too blocky, okay? Boom. Now let's actually go back with it, and you can see that the shape is much more appealing and softer, which is pretty nice. But obviously you can always just, whenever you just add some random hair strands like this, there doesn't have to be like super thin, there can be like a little bit thicker, but you can always go with like an eraser and just erase them a little bit to make them softer. Okay, so now for the last part, which can take your anime faces from a potato to an amazing piece, is the final effects. So what I mean by that, pretty much here we have a normal face like this, and we can add a couple of things to make it better. So you can see that it's pretty flat, and actually I don't like what I did here with these transitions, but let's take this face first. And now what I do in this stage, it's pretty much at the end, so what I do here is make a new correction layer. Obviously in Photoshop, on whatever program you use, it would be different, but I use a correction layer and a couple of things here. So first, brightness, and you can see here we can make it more brighter, make it darker, play with contrast, so more contrast, less contrast, and here you can easily break your drawing. So don't do a lot. We can see that with a bit we already added like more contrast and it just looks better. So now we can add another thing. So correction layer, and here is color balance. So I use mainly just these two. So now here we have a couple of channels. So shadow, here we can just bump our shadow, so make them a little bit colder, cooler, so something like this, boom. And then highlights, we want to make them warmer. So we can already see here, maybe this, something like that, that we have a warmer skin tones, but like cooler shadows and hair. We can probably just make it a little bit more cooler, but that looks all right. So boom. Now obviously without, with, huge difference, looks much better. So without, with, obviously we can then just decrease the opacity of these layers if it's too strong, but it looks much better already. So these are correction layers. Obviously you can just go with an airbrush, pick a normal, like maybe add glow layer, and just add some light, something like this, to make the drawing softer. I usually like to actually just whenever I have like a parts, like a holes, I like to add some light there like this, but maybe use a different layer. So maybe add glow, make it darker and something like this perhaps. Boom, a little bit of light here, maybe a little bit light here, here, something like that, here, boom, boom, boom. Just makes it softer and there. Obviously up top we can add another layer, make it add glow, boom, less saturation and just makes it softer and like you see like glowy, pretty nice. But what I do after I add these effects, so here we can see without any with, like it looks much better. So now what I do is I basically just take all layers, okay, merge them, boom, we have one nice layer. And then I go into filters, which is next thing. So effects, chromatic aberration, and here we take this point, put it into the middle of the face, and now what it does is basically moves the color channels a little bit, displace them. So if we actually zoom in here, we can see that we have now some blue, some red colors and even some greens. So now if we hit preview, we see that it just looks normal. Boom, it doesn't look normal, looks much better. Now I usually just use radial, okay, so pretty much from this circle, from this X, it's a circle, and obviously how strong it is. You can make it softer like that, harder, like more intensity. You can see that there's more of this. Obviously angle, if we change it, you can see that. But to be honest, just less is more. And for some like anime drawings, I just take it lateral, and you see that now it looks trippy. So make it like 3 and it already looks good. Obviously angle will change the direction that each channel just goes. So here we can maybe do whatever you want. So you said the blue goes down, the red goes right, and here blue goes up, red goes down, and yeah. So just whatever you want to do. Let's just keep it something like this. Boom. You see that these reds here in eye actually move. So boom. And now without with a little bit, but it actually makes it more interesting. Boom. Now next thing is actually filters, effects, and noise. I like to add a little bit of noise. It makes it like more cohesive, and from obviously if you zoom in, there's a lot of random colors now, but I don't know, I just really like the way it looks. And now if you want to learn how to actually render these anime faces, you can check out my Patreon for monthly tutorials, and next week there will be a full tutorial on how to actually render faces with eyes and hair and skin. But also you can get the previous tutorials there with how to actually draw an anime face. But now if you want to actually learn how to draw anime faces, you can check out this video here. They will help you with it. So hope you enjoyed, and bye to the next one.